A very good evening to you. Welcome to another hot button issue right here on Choice Television with me, Timothy Polio. We go up until 10 o'clock this evening, at which time we'll be concluding with the clip that peaked. Well, last evening, you'll have watched over this station the address by the Prime Minister of St. Lucia, much anticipated address, coming on the heels of speculation, coming on the heels of concerns that were expressed by the St. Lucian public over the last few weeks, and certainly with regard to the operations of the Royal St. Lucia Police Force. At the time, speculation that the U.S. authorities had decided to withdraw some of its training programs for the members of the Royal St. Lucia Police Force. In fact, the suggestion was that police officers were being targeted by the U.S. You heard confirmation of this from the Prime Minister of St. Lucia, Dr. Kenny Anthony, last evening. And we have a report from Tresha Lionel, which was filed this evening during the Choice News Now broadcast.
Under what is being described as Leahy Law, which is named after a senator from Vermont, if the U.S. Secretary of State has credible information that any unit of the security forces of a foreign country has committed a gross violation of human rights, U.S.-sponsored assistance to it will be withdrawn. Washington is reportedly dissatisfied with the outcome of recent inquests into the 12 police killings under review. Dr. Anthony says that 6 inquests have been held so far, which returned verdicts of death by lawful act, while the inquest into the 5 individuals killed in Vieux-Fort during a police operation is yet to be completed. One other inquest is to undergo further review.
Since the United States has decided to impose sanctions on members of the Royal St. Lucia Police Force, that it is reasonably clear that it does not have confidence in the outcome of the inquest to bring those responsible for the killings to justice. That is, if there is a basis to do so. Clearly, too, the presumption seems to be that the killings were unlawful. As the government said in a recent statement, it is undeniable that it is in our vital interest to maintain close ties of cooperation with the United States in security matters. From its first few months in office, the government has always understood the seriousness of this matter and its implications for the police force and indeed the former UWP political directorate.
It was during the reign of the previous United Workers' Party government of Mr. Stephenson King that the police killings under what was dubbed Restore Confidence occurred. Prime Minister Dr. Kenny Anthony has asked rhetorically whether the killings were premeditated or lawful. He says that to bring closure to the issue, government has to take 2 steps.
Firstly, the government has invited the CARICOM Implementation Agency for Crime and Security, IMPACS, to identify 3 senior investigators from the region to investigate the so-called extrajudicial killings. The investigators will be asked to evaluate all available evidence and determine whether or not these matters warrant further action. The findings, if adverse, will be forwarded to the Director of Public Prosecutions, who has ultimate jurisdiction in criminal matters. Secondly, government will enact new legislation to conduct investigation of the type just proposed so as to ensure that such investigations enjoy the full protection of the law and that the findings of any investigation are lawfully transmitted to the Director of Public Prosecutions. This measure is needed to ensure that a mechanism exists to deal with such situations in the future should such unexplained or suspicious deaths occur.
Nearly a fortnight ago, a police shooting at Chasse Bawano claimed the life of a 31-year-old man. The matter is under police investigation. For Choice News Now, I am Tresha Lionel reporting.
Thank you very much, Tresha, for this report, which was filed this evening during the Choice News Now broadcast. Well, most of you would have watched the address to the nation last evening, which again focused on suggestions by the United States that there were extrajudicial killings in St. Lucia between 2010 and 2011, which are yet to be thoroughly investigated, at least from the perspective of the U.S. You'd have watched the address. Likewise, Dr. Gale Rigobert, the MP for Miku North, would have done that. She is also the deputy political leader of the opposition United Workers' Party, and at one time a lecturer in international relations at the St. Augustine campus of the University of the West Indies. Welcome to the program, ma'am.
Thank you, Tim. Thanks for having me.
Just listening to the Prime Minister, one can detect that he's pointing an accusatory finger at the United Workers' Party, making reference to the fact that the police killings occurred between 2010 and 2011, that was during the reign of the United Workers' Party and Mrs. Timothy King. Do you believe that the UWP has anything to answer?
With matters relating to crime, Tim, we must appreciate that these are very sensitive issues. And as politicians, we should avoid any temptation to politicize issues pertaining to the maintenance of law and order in our country. I would hate to think, given the tenor of last evening's speech, that the Prime Minister was in any way trying to lay blame, insofar as we are good citizens of this country, and I'm sure we want to see a reasonable sense of discipline, peace, and order in our community.
But no doubt, when things of that nature occur, as is clearly demonstrated now, as a government, as a society, there will be repercussions. And I think that's the first taste of such repercussion that we're experiencing right now. Again, I'm asking, do you think that the United Workers' Party, as an administration which presided over the affairs of state at the time that those incidents occurred, do you think that the government, the previous administration, would have any questions to answer, explanation to provide as far as this is concerned? Because it is a political issue.
I have come to appreciate the sensitivity of security matters. And I also know that there are discussions that take place which perhaps happen within the corridors of government, but those of particular sensitivity may very well occur between a prime minister perhaps and the police commissioner, and one may not always be privy to that discussion even though one is part of a government structure.
Now, crime will continue to haunt St. Lucia for quite some time now, and any administration that is presiding over the affairs of state. Moving forward, how do you think we should address this or tackle this particular bugbear? Because generally speaking, we cannot and seek solutions through quick fixes.
I'm so happy you said that, Tim, to the extent that we have the firm view that crime in particular ought to be treated with the greatest level of participation from the various sectors of society, and most particularly that we adopt a bipartisan approach in dealing with matters relating to crime, given the implications for all herein.
Must we always answer to the United States? Because it is a powerful nation, is the world's lone superpower. It is also the world's policeman.
We have had long-standing good relations with the United States of America. And I think one can appreciate that, especially given the events of 9/11, that what we have seen is a reconfiguration of global relations, a reconfiguration of relations among states, and perhaps a return to the Cold War sensitivities that obtained in the aftermath of World War II. The first Cold War, if I dare call it the first Cold War, was characterized by an ideological schism between democracy and capitalism and the core tenets of communism on the other hand. And what 9/11 did was to reconfigure the world and see a redrawing of the map, so to speak, along very simple lines, one may think, because you will recall that President Obama's predecessor had said, "You are either with us or against us." And that was a very clear signal to friends and partners in the international community as to what position they should adopt should they wish to maintain relations with the United States of America. There is no denying that given the plethora of activity in Latin America with regard to the left in particular, that there is a certain sensitivity on the part of the United States, which in large measure perhaps resembles that which it felt during the First Cold War, that as its neighbors, such as countries in the Eastern Caribbean and Latin America, which, as you know, geographically provide the natural fencing around the United States of America, that there is some unease as to how porous our borders have become, the kinds of relations we have forged, and how that therefore translates with regard to U.S. security.
So you're venturing into what? ALBA? Because I think the United Workers' Party has made certainly a lot of St. Lucia joining ALBA over the last few weeks, and maybe saying that the action of the U.S. could be attributed to this.
Of course. And you know, Tim, we have to be careful the kinds of relations we forge with traditional partners and new and emerging powers in the international system. We have had development friends and partners who have been good to St. Lucia. And there is no denying that there is a reconfiguration of world powers. Notwithstanding, the United States is still the hegemon, at least largely seen to be the hegemon, and that we should be very careful, notwithstanding any urgency to develop or forge new relations, that we are not seen to be hampering traditional or historical relations with our friends and partners in the international community.
So therefore, we can expect that the U.S. will take action against Dominica, Antigua, and also St. Vincent? Because from what I could see, from my vantage point, it has not happened.
Well, and it's good that you said that, Tim, because one wonders, can any one action trigger that kind of response from the United States? Can it be any number of things?
So it's not necessarily ALBA then, based on what you're saying?
Not necessarily any one thing. It's ALBA. It is perhaps the perceived inefficiencies within our judicial system with regard to processing cases. That's a human rights issue. Very often when we speak of human rights issues, I think especially with regard to the police matter, we have not expanded our understanding and definition of human rights. So if perhaps human rights might be one of the variables or considerations that has provoked the U.S. to respond in a particular matter, we have to expand our understanding of it. There needs to be a more holistic interpretation of the actions of the United States.
So therefore, the United Workers' Party is not certain that it's ALBA because of St. Lucia having
It
joined
certainly
ALBA.
is a variable, given the particular sensitivity of the United States in the current climate and the activities of the left in Latin America. We know what it is. ALBA and Petrocaribe are institutional arrangements that are set up as an alternative to the liberal Western reading or purview or way of doing things, which they see to be largely emanating from Washington, D.C.
Yeah, but couldn't Washington be sufficiently realistic to say that amidst its own economic problems, it has not been able to provide the kind of economic assistance to the region? And therefore, if certain countries in the Caribbean, Latin America, etc., are looking forward to coalescing and setting up this kind of arrangement whereby they could look after their own interests, wouldn't Washington appreciate this? Because after all, if you're saying that by joining ALBA, we run the risk of being penalized by the United States, what about us having had relations with Cuba for so long?
Well, again, it's the change in configuration, the changing ethos, the change in philosophy, a reassertion of the Latin American left. Not in and of itself, but very explicitly as an alternative to American hegemonic position in the region. So one cannot read ALBA or Petrocaribe in a strictly altruistic fashion as if it was solely to help the smaller islands. There's a greater goal, and that is to forge an alliance within Latin America and with friends from the Eastern Caribbean to serve as a powerful alternative to U.S. hegemonic position in the region.
We have extrajudicial killings in the dozens taking place on an annual basis in Jamaica. Jamaica is also a member of Petro-Caribbean, not ALBA. And the U.S. has not taken such action against it.
That's precisely why I'm saying it could be any number of issues in combination. And that's why we have to understand that, one, we need to disaggregate the argument, look at the variables. The judicial killings, allegedly, have been investigated. I understood from what the Prime Minister was saying that perhaps the outcome has been less than satisfactory, and so he has been propelled to invite 3 senior officers or 3 officers from Impacts CARICOM to oversee an investigation into the same matter, which I think has some implications for morale in the police force. I think if you have gone through a process and there has been a particular outcome,
which is the inquest, right?
The inquest. To then invite an external entity, as competent as they are, because the Impacts, they do great work, as competent as they are, it sends a signal that I do not quite trust the outcome thereof.
But
that's very, very important.
But Dr. Rigobert, we're always in the business of pleasing the United States, so why should that surprise you?
Are we here pleasing the United States, or are we here honoring our traditional historical relations?
We're saving our tails because of the economic situation that we're facing right now, the backlash, the repercussions. Is that what it is?
And there's serious repercussions. And to the extent that the current administration has taken us down a particular foreign policy path without necessarily articulating it in detail to the people of St. Lucia. So are we every Monday morning going to have a breaking news item, another diplomatic slap on the wrist? It could be further visa restrictions. It could be the return of persons from our diasporic communities up there. It could be, very significantly, we cannot underestimate the decision by the United States to withhold funding or technical assistance to the police force. That is significant, because you know how technology evolves. You know how the criminal world works. The police force has to keep in step with that. So that is, I think, quite a diplomatic slap on the wrist.
Could we not get assistance elsewhere? Must it be the United States?
Well, insofar as they have traditionally assisted in that area, and so to our other partners, as you have indicated, but they have been the traditional ones.
But can't we break away from tradition? Isn't that what that is certainly causing us to be in this mired state at this particular time, where we are not venturing outside of what we know and who we know?
Well, if you are at all venturing, then you should get to know entirely what you're getting into. Because as I listen to the various calling programs today, and I've followed the arguments on the social network, the question is, do we understand the fine print of being members of ALBA? Do we understand the fine print? What are the conditionalities? What are the terms? How does that translate in the current economic situation and for the next generation? In some cases, we're looking at 25, 30 years. How does that translate economically? How will the next generation respond to that? Will we have the capacity to repay? Yes, it seems like a quick fix, and that's always the danger of quick fixes. It's in the long run, what will it cost you? One, and secondly, it's not just about ALBA, but what about ALBA's extra-regional associations? So it's like a marriage. You enter a family. Yes, there's your spouse within that context, but there's an extended family as well to which you need to relate. How then do you begin to relate to that extended family? So who are ALBA's friends outside of the region? Who are the members, those with maybe associate membership or observer status or some kind of affiliation? Who are they? And where are they within the context of the international community? And how do they affect our relations with, for example, the United Kingdom, again, a very good friend of ours, and the United States?
Couldn't the United Workers' Party just merely latching on to this particular issue because it sees it as an opportunity, probably to scare the St. Lucian voters? Because I think with any degree of certainty that you're in a position to say that the action was taken by the U.S. because of us joining ALBA, when constant reference being made there to the Leahy Law, where if there's gross violation of one's human rights, the U.S. has said clearly that it will withdraw those kind of assistance to the security forces, to any unit of your security forces?
Why now? Why now? Why the urgency now?
You tell me.
That's the question. If it is that the issue was really the alleged extrajudicial killings, they would have come in sooner because the allegation was made from the very night, perhaps, the incidents would have taken place. Why would it take them now, this long? Is it that there are other things that are aggravating the United States, other things of concern to our other friends in the international community, then forcing them to act quicker than perhaps they were required to initially, given the combination of factors and the sequencing as well, maybe the speed with which there seems to be some kind of deepening of relations with Latin America, Caribbean, Alba in particular.
But you don't have the clear answer to that
It
question.
is never any one thing. It is never any one variable. You must appreciate that for a country to respond diplomatically to any given situation, usually it is an amalgamation, a number of reasons, some of which may tip them over more than others.
But we heard from the Prime Minister during his address to the nation where he's making clear reference to the police killings, the alleged extrajudicial police killings, and probably that's what he's being fed. That's the kind of information is being fed by the U.S. authorities.
Can I offer another argument? Could it be that in the same spirit of concerns about human rights, that the United States is concerned that our judicial system isn't sufficiently efficient in processing people on remand? That's a natural concern within the context of human rights. Don't you think that too would raise a red flag?
And therefore, both administrations should take responsibility for this.
And that is why I said previously, we should not politicize crime. The United Workers' Party is more than happy to engage with the administration to resolve this. This is not a party problem. This is St. Lucian's problem. It's your problem. It's my problem. And we are saying, as a responsible party, let's talk about this. Let's come to a solution.
Can we really take on the U.S. on this particular issue, the stance that's taken against the Royal St. Lucia Police Force? Can we do anything to appease the U.S., or should we?
Well, why not? Do we want to damage, destroy, or shun our traditional friends and partners? Listen, another interpretation has been with regard to how we have conducted our affairs within the United Nations. Traditionally and largely, we have gone with the United States. There is a creeping suspicion that our voting pattern within the United Nations is changing, which, if that is the case, is a significant foreign policy shift of the country, given that which obtained previously.
Okay, what's the evidence of this?
Well, I'm happy you said that. One must appreciate that as a small island state, when we interact in the international community, what we have is the power of the vote, either individually in bilateral relations or collectively as members of the OECS or as members of CARICOM. And if it is that a friend or partner perceives that our behavior within the United Nations is appearing to be, take for example, even outside the context of the UN. Very recently, the Vice President of the United States visited Trinidad. And of course, there were other Caribbean leaders who were invited. And I think that on that occasion, the Prime Minister was absent and may have opted to visit Cuba instead. And it was the Deputy Prime Minister who represented St. Lucia. For whatever reason, with the naked diplomatic eye, it does not appear to be the proper thing to do without due explanation.
But let me take you back to a point that you made early on, which is our voting pattern at the United Nations. You did not give any specifics with regard to this.
Let me tell you, there are, take for example, and this one is important because it's close to home, our relations with respect to Taiwan versus China. And the last administration was very explicit in establishing relations with Taiwan. So given that, Taiwan could reasonably expect that when an issue of any sensitivity would have come up within the UN with regard to China on Taiwan, then St. Lucia would naturally, that is the expectation. Anytime there's a perceived deviation from that, in tone, tenor, or expression, it is perceived then by our partner that there seems to be a deviation from that. And I'm sure in time you'll come to understand the implications of that too.
But the U.S. does not really recognize Taiwan as a nation.
No,
as
I
a
was
country.
using how relationships are interpreted and how the expected behavior is then derived from the interpretation of that behavior. So, for example, now that we are members of ALBA, is it that we are, and Petro-Caribe is one of the new financial instruments that we may be accessing? Is it that there's an expectation, therefore, with respect to the issue on the Falkland Islands, that we should side with Venezuela and with Argentina and not with the UK? How does it translate? So it's a very complex, a number of intertwined issues, and that's why I thought it wholly irresponsible and very concerning and worrisome that we were identifying an issue as the issue, the exclusive issue, whereas there are so many other issues that, like I said, together, it could cause the diplomatic slap on the wrist. And who knows which one of those might have been the straw that broke the camel's back, if you want to give a respective weight or significance to any one of the actions that has been taken by the current administration in recent times.
You're watching Hot Button Issue. We'll be back in just a moment. Please stay with us. My guest this evening is the MP for Mico North, who's also the deputy political leader of the main opposition, United Workers' Party. Welcome back. You're watching Hot Button Issue right here on Choice Television. We'll put a telephone number on the screen so that you can call right now with your questions and comments for my guest. Once again, she is Dr. Gale Rigobert, who is the MP for Mico North and also the Shadow Minister for External Affairs and Deputy Political Leader of the main opposition, United Workers' Party. Amidst all of this happening, ma'am, do you think that we should be paying closer attention and to some of the issues being raised by our human rights activists? More on that, we have a caller line. Good evening, this is Hot Button Issue. You on the air?
Yeah, Timothy, good night.
Hi, good evening to you.
Good night to your guest.
Hello, good evening.
Yeah. Timothy, I've always had a problem with an incident or something disastrous happening under an individual's watch or at the time somebody's in office or somebody's at the helm. And if and when that person is supposed to be held responsible, and we would simply say, this particular incident happened at the time so-and-so was in office. There's nothing wrong with that. From time to time, you literally, or you want to get the impression that somebody is trying to evade or trying to avoid or prevent somebody from saying that it happened under a particular person's watch. Now, this particular incident, as your guest alluded to, shouldn't be politicized. I totally agree with that. Totally agree with that. But I don't think there's anything wrong with Dr. Anthony saying that the incident or whatever transpired happened under the former administration's term in office. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And more often than not, some of us tend to have a problem with that, saying that, because it did happen, okay? And let's not politicize. I would totally agree with that. What I really admire, Timothy, I've been very impressed with your question and your question posed to her. Oh, yes. But her, I mean, she tried her best to, I better put it, she tried her best to answer, but the answers were not direct. I mean, there were several responses. There were several reasons why she gave X and Y happened and stuff like that. You understand? But I think there were times when we looked to our politicians to be a little more direct.
Okay. Do you have a question for her, therefore?
Yeah. Well, well, my it's not necessarily a question. You know, it's just that, like I said before, I mean, the incident happened. I think we need to move forward, and let's hope for the best. But I'm very impressed with your question, honestly.
Okay, sir. Thank you so much. We're taking a call. Hot button issue. Good evening. You on the air?
Yes, good evening.
Hi. Good evening to you, ma'am. Can you speak up a bit?
Hello?
Yes. Just speak up, please. Go ahead.
Yes, good evening. I'd like to make a contribution.
Go right
Hello?
ahead.
Hello.
Yes, I'd like to make a contribution.
Yes, go ahead, ma'am.
I
You're listening
quite
to the
agree
television
with
set.
the-
Ignore it for a moment. Just go ahead, please.
Yes, I quite agree with Miss.
Okay. We'll have to thank you so much for calling. Please turn down the volume of your television set. That is what is causing all the confusion. There's a reverberation that is occurring. You're listening to the television set and also trying to communicate with us at the same time. Good evening. This is Hot Button Issue. You're on the air. Hello. Let's continue to take your calls. Good evening. Go ahead with your contribution, caller. Hello. Good evening to you, caller. Okay, so we await your calls. Good evening. This is Hot Button Issue. You're on the air.
Hey, good evening, Tim.
Hi. Good evening to you, caller.
Good evening, Dr. Gale.
Hello.
Dr. Gale, during your interview there with Mr. Poleo,
Can you have some speaker?
Speak up a bit, please.
Yeah, I said during the interview with Dr. Poleo, he
Doctor,
did mention,
Mr. Sir.
yeah, sorry about that. With Mr. Poleo did ask you whether should we always stay with the United States. I'm putting the question to you now, Dr. Rigobert. Can we at this time afford to alienate our traditional friends and partners? Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Can you repeat the question?
Can we at this time alienate our friends and partners?
We certainly at this time should not alienate our friends and partners, especially given the current climate. Those who have remained true to us, those who have continued to support us, notwithstanding their own domestic situations, I think we need to applaud them for so doing.
We have a call. Good evening. This is Hot Button Issue.
Good night, Tim.
Hi. Good evening to you, sir.
Good night, Madam Rigobert.
Good evening, sir.
Do you recall the last administration of UWP that the U.S. government said that the whole government was corrupt?
Okay.
That came over the news.
Walk me through that. Who said that?
Well, it came over the news, Tim.
No. Who said that?
Well,
who in the U.S. administration?
I understand that the U.S. It came over the news.
No.
The news.
All right. Okay, caller. It was never said.
But it came over the news, Tim.
Caller, it was never said. Unless you could tell me that a particular ambassador, diplomatic official made that comment, sir, it was never said.
Somebody will call you back and tell you.
No. I want you to substantiate what you said.
Okay, all right.
Right?
Well, I'll find out and I'll let you know.
Well, you should have done that before.
Okay, all right.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Hot Button Issue. Good evening. You on the air?
Yes, hello.
Hi. Good evening to you, caller.
Hi, Tim.
Good evening to you.
Tim, during the reign of the UWP, a task force was formed to look at crime, and I don't know if Rigobert would know about it, but Mr. Shastny, the now political leader, I think, who sat on that. What was their job? What was the directive? Listening to the police commissioner yesterday, when the question was asked, did he get directives from the government? That question was never answered. Another thing, part two of my question is, was it the big reason for removing Mr. Regis as commissioner and putting another person that can follow directives by the political directorate? Was there any motive in doing that so the political directorate can actually have their way? I want to know if she can answer those questions.
Okay, so hold on. Was it ever stated that... Okay, we lost the call, but I wanted to ask him whether it was clearly stated by the previous administration that it would want to remove Mr. Regis and replace him with Mr. Francois for a particular reason, because the administration then was seeing him as somebody that they could walk over. But that's not what the impression I ever got when the decision was taken to replace Mr. Regis. But go ahead.
I must say that the former minister with responsibility for the police force would be best placed to answer this.
We have a call. Good evening. This is Hot Button Issue. You on the air?
Hello, Tim.
Hi, good evening to you.
Dr. Rigobert asked you a very important question, and you must be aware of that. If there is a motion in the UN that has to be passed against Alba vis-a-vis any petty issue or some significant issues, the Alba is expecting that St. Lucia has to.
That is the
They're
expectation.
expecting that. That's an obligation. Because this is the main thing we must ask ourselves. Those countries are enemy to America presently as we speak. But we're dancing all around, but we don't want to come with the record. The record will speak for itself, whether we want to speak it or not. If there is a motion against Taiwan in the UN presently, Taiwan is expecting St. Lucia to support them, whether they have wit or not. That is expected. That is diplomacy. That's why they have diplomatic ties. So I think I clear the air on that, and I believe more people can do that.
Thank you so much for calling. Good evening. This is Hot Button Issue. You on the air?
Yes, this question is for you.
Hello. Good evening to you, caller.
Yes, Tim, this question is for you. Good night. Since you've been so adamant about the extrajudicial killings, and I find Dr. Rigobert has been answering you very, very, very pleasantly and very straight to the point, although the previous caller thinks that she's not doing a good job. What about Egypt? In 2011, Barak was put down by the people of Egypt, and the U.S. is still giving them aid, $1.5 billion in aid. And their human rights record is very bad. So what do you think about it?
Well, I think the U.S. has decided to temporarily withdraw that $1.5 million. But what has happened is that Egypt's neighbors, they have, I think, doubled, quadrupled that amount. Definitely the U.S. for quite some time has seen Egypt as an ally, that a nation that they could definitely have good relations with, a nation that they need. And that's how the U.S. operates to a large extent. If it needs you, well, it really would ignore your sins, as is the case with China. So, in essence, a little double standard on the part of the U.S. from time to time.
I heard you.
Okay, caller?
I heard you.
All right, thank you so much. Hot Button Issue, good evening, you're on the air. Hi, good evening to you.
Good night.
Good evening to you, caller.
Yes. Hello.
Go ahead with your contribution, caller. Hello? Hello, good evening.
Yes, Tim.
Go ahead, please. Caller, please go ahead with your contribution.
Yes, good night, sir.
Good night to you.
Okay. Tim, over the last 20 years, I'm putting it to you that we have had about 400 homicides, right?
Well, so we heard, I think, from the head of state, the Governor General.
The
I think it's over the last 10 years, she said.
10 years? Okay, so if in 10 years you had 400, I'm putting it in 20, you had at least 800, right?
Average, yeah.
Okay. Wouldn't that be classed as human rights violation? In that you have 800 victims, and to the best of, well, according to the Prime Minister, most of them unresolved. Yes?
But the majority of those would not be police killings, eh? Remember, the U.S. is preoccupied with the police killings. Alleged police killings.
Tim, we're not talking about police killings, you know. In fact, we're talking about total, everything together, all our homicides. And we have a judicial system which, by all what we can see, that does not work. It's not working properly. The judicial system is in a mess. We've been told time and time again that the system is failing, I mean, just this week the DPP was saying that the issues, the problems that they are encountering in just taking one matter up, you know. And you know, all of this is overshadowed by an alleged extrajudicial killing by the police. The Commissioner of Police have spoken openly about that. when Martinez raised that issue, it said that there is nothing like an extrajudicial killing. You know? And the police is just being held at ransom over all those 800 homicides that we're talking about. Since there is to this. More to this than that. And that's what I'm going to say from now.
Okay. Thank you so much for your contribution. What say you, ma'am?
Well, I was having some difficulty hearing him. But if I may say that there's a new conundrum in our foreign policy relations. And that is that we're caught between maintaining and deepening our existing relations and determining which are the best relations to form.
Hold that point. You have a call. Good evening, Hot Button Issue. You on the air?
Hi, Tim.
Hi, good evening to you, sir.
Good evening. I just want to ask, where was America when Sir John Compton in 1993, I think it was, gave an order that the police kill the farmers in the valley?
No.
Where was America?
I don't think there was an order. Clear, I think he said, clear the streets by any means necessary. But he never said, no, he never said directly go out there and kill the farmers. Let's be fair, caller. Let's be precise on this issue.
And so, Kenny Anthony last night in his address to the nation said that King said that criminals would be pursued, they would be prosecuted, and so on. But
they will be judged.
Compton said the same thing.
No. He said they will be judged. The former prime minister said they will be judged.
Yes.
Brought before court, prosecuted. Yes, and if they're found guilty, sent to prison.
Prime Minister Compton said to clear the streets by any means necessary. So I'm asking, where was America in 1993 when that happened? There was no withdrawal of passports and visas or nothing like that. Look, why now can he come in with that story that because of what is going on now is because of the extrajudicial killings? That's just a whole
decoy,
cock and bull story. I don't believe that. I don't feel that. I feel there's more to that, to what is happening right now, than just what happened in 2011. There is more that is going on that the politicians are not telling us.
Okay.
And I think that
maybe the Leahy law was not in effect then in 1993. Okay, the law that says that if there's gross violation of one's human rights, the U.S. would reserve the right not to provide training assistance to your police officers and your soldiers and so on. That was not in effect then, sir.
Well, maybe. Well, I concur, yes.
All right, sir.
Maybe.
Thank you so much. Let's get into the call. Good evening. Hot Button Issue, you on the air?
Hi, good night.
Good evening to you, caller.
Yeah. You ready for me?
Go ahead.
Okay. Tim, good night.
Good night to you.
Gail, good night.
Hello, good evening.
All right. Interesting program. Tim, you see, what we must all understand, we must go back to our drawing board. When this very same government was in opposition, they were very quick to write to the American embassy or ambassador to let them, you know, to like politicize things that are happening under the former regime government, like the killings, and letting them be aware of all what was happening.
We see a lot of things that we cannot substantiate. I cannot tell you that the current prime minister was in opposition.
It's not politics. It's not politics.
No. He would have met, as leader of the opposition, he would have met the U.S. ambassadors and so on.
I agree, but let me tell you.
But we don't know the nature of those meetings.
Well, we don't know.
Okay?
But again, as Dr. Gale pinpointed to you, the government would sit down as a government minister and the police commissioner. They could have indoor meetings and in certain conversations that you as a minister, you may be the Minister of Health or the Minister of Foreign Affairs, and you may not be aware of what conversation transpired, what transpired between the behind-door business.
So that's why we cannot make an assumption.
But let me tell you, where you can make the assumption is, remember he came publicly, the very same Prime Minister today came publicly and said that he is writing to the foreign or the international business investors, Central is not safe to invest in it. You remember that? You remember his statement? You remember he came out publicly and said that?
I remember
that is to tell you. So if he could do so, what would tell you he will not do? He was not in authority to do what he was doing. So, right, you see, God has a way working, and we must always understand that. It's not because people are educated and they are doctored that they could come into the layman's mind and play things. At the end of the day, that is why maybe God allowed them to win elections, that when it's smiting them in their face, they went somewhere to hide it. We have to be careful. And as
But
Dr. Gale said, we must not
Caller, it's important when representing
crime,
our arguments to
rights,
focus on what we know and what we don't know than what we don't know.
And we know what's happening here. Human rights is something, if the lay law is now in effect, we should know, the PM should know as a law, as a lawyer, he should know that the judiciary here has been way beyond wit. In the prisons, we have so many people sitting there, years after years, just sitting there on remand. The courts, the lawyers always sending letters. You may have a matter, let we say you have a matter in court, 5 years, and it's depending on the lawyers because they always postponing, they never there, they blah blah blah, they shut off this, they shut off that, they shut off this. So you think the international, just like we're watching CNN here, we're seeing things happening, the 911 things happen, we're seeing everything happening in America. You think America is not getting the information that's what's happening here too? So at the end of the day, brother, at the end of the day, what is happening there? You see, the human rights is maybe one of the issue, but the international relationship we have had all over the years. We have had growth with the international relationship, and today maybe new powers are just coming in, and maybe you just want to jump in without a consensus of the people of this country. I remember when Surgeon went to England for independence. He was sent back here to get the people of St. Lucia's on board. If not, he would not get independence. He had to come back here and ask the people for independence if they wanted independence. So it's just the same thing with the ALBA and all these kind of issues. It's not a government thing, but it's a St. Lucian thing.
Okay,
and the St. Lucian people have to be in the front line to decide yes or no. So all these things together is giving you a grand total. Good night. I'm not the only one on
Okay, thank you so much. What's it?
I really want to respond to that because one must be careful in the analysis of this. It is not just the killing in and of themselves, the alleged extrajudicial killings in and of themselves, but that due process must be seen to have been followed. And not just for these victims, but for any other victim within the country. And that's what I'm saying. Let us not politicize this. This is not, does not affect any one group of people only. That when someone is seen to have allegedly committed a crime, that due process must follow within a given time. And herein comes the implications for the kinds of relations we have in the international community. Because England, for example, has been very forthcoming with lending technical support in that regard to help us make more efficient our judicial system. And we remain grateful to them for that. We don't therefore want to find ourselves within any country grouping that has an ambiguous relationship with the United Kingdom, because then that can, again, affect how they relate to us on the ground. And that is how the issues are interrelated and intertwined. That's why I'm insisting it is no one issue. And this has further implications for our economic security. If it is, there is a suggestion, as was signaled last night, I suppose, that there is some level of discomfort with the institution that is meant to uphold law and order. One of the first things an investor looks into is the issue of security in the state in which he or she is meant to invest. So that's what I'm saying. The debate needs to be opened up. There needs to be a holistic look at this, and to not very conveniently, for largely political reasons, to stick it on one issue. There are a host of variables. Let's look at all the issues that would have prompted the U.S. to operationalize the Leahy Law, and what are the implications.
You're watching Hot Button Issue. Please stay with us. We'll take a commercial break. On return, I'll be taking 3 calls, and we conclude with the clip that peaked. Welcome back. Thank you so much for staying with us. You're watching Hot Button Issue, and we had a teaser there. Coming up, we'll be having the clip that peaked. Good evening. Let's take another call. Good evening. You're on the air.
Hi. Good evening, team.
Good evening to you, ma'am.
Okay, let me get away from the television. Okay, team. While I accept the views of your guest tonight on the international relationships, however, I also believe that if there was no Operation Restore Confidence, we would not be here. So even though we had joined ALBA, had this operation not gone down, where 12 persons were killed, right, on the directive of outside forces, we would not be here. This is the question.
Hold on. You say under directive of outside forces. Clarify, ma'am. We have to substantiate everything that we say.
What's that?
We have to substantiate everything that we say. You said that under outside forces, right?
Or be it outside or inside forces, because somebody had to, according to what we're hearing, right? There was a list, okay? It was clarified. There was a list.
No, caller, there was hold on. There was a list, but we don't know the source of the list. To really give credence to that list, you must know the source of the list.
Okay, team, there's not a source of a list, but there was a list.
There was a list, but we don't know who created the list.
Whoever put the list together, whoever that was killed, were killed. And there's another thing that I have
we don't even know. A criminal could have done it. We're in the technological era.
Come on, Tim. Like a good friend would say, who is pissing in people's eyes? A criminal would have killed us, guys, in Viewport? Come on.
We are in the technological era. Anyway, but continue.
Team, okay, honestly, but let me tell you something. And there's another point that I also have to bring up. Because, your guest is going around, you're asking her the questions. She's not really getting to the point. And as a matter of fact, the last I heard during the last administration, wasn't it John in Compton that also had gone to Barbados to answer questions? This is my question. I'm trying to see why are you all blaming, or why people are blaming right now this present administration on questions. If America, is concerned about certain things, they're going to be questioning every and anybody that they find. Okay? Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you so much. How do you respond, ma'am?
Tim, that is why I have been very clear from the start. It is a dangerous road to tread when we choose to politicize crime. Crime should not be politicized, and that is why I said the time has come for a bipartisan approach to resolving the inefficiencies that regarding judicial processing, how we view the police force, ensuring that we maintain and attract more technical assistance to make those entities more efficient.
We have another call. Good evening. This is Hot Button Issue. You're on the air. Hello.
Hello.
Hi, good evening to you, ma'am. You're on the air.
Yes, good evening, Dr. Rigobert.
Hi.
And good evening, Tim.
Good evening to you.
Dr. Rigobert, I must applaud you for the way that you handle yourself this evening.
Thank you very kindly.
I think you're my model of what you call a politician. But I must first say that we should be careful some of the things that we're saying, because a lot of people seem to be riding or piggybacking on this issue at the moment, where like you've been saying, we shouldn't politicize things. We should be coming together and try and find a solution, if there is one to be had. And also, Miss Mary Francis, or whatever her name is, Agnes Francis, I'm not sure,
Miss Mary Francis
has been in the media talking about extrajudicial killings and so forth. But what about the incident with the lawyer? What is she saying about this? An innocent person was also shot. What has happened to this case? Is she not talking about one? Is it because it's the first? That's my question.
Okay, thank you so much. Let's take a final call. Good evening. This is Hot Button Issue. You're on the air.
Yes, good evening, Tim.
Hi. Good evening to you, sir.
What's up? Not bad.
All right.
I do not totally agree with the theory that because you have ties with Petro-Carib, that if you go to the UN and you have to vote, and I don't agree with that theory. If that is the case, then it means that Dominica Grenada sentencing. Very soon the US will lose all these countries. But let's look at Central, for example. Originally, this present government had ties with China. They are still friends of China, but they keep ties with Taiwan. So if they were supposed to be at the UN...
Well, the government doesn't have any relations with China. The party is the SLP, the party.
The party, right. But that very same party forms the government and has maintained ties with Taiwan. But you go to the UN and have to vote on something. What do you vote? Now, for the Petrocarib issue, we talk about links with Iran. But who Iran has links with? China. China has links with the U.S. So what is it? We have ties with the UK. I don't think voting is an issue. I don't think voting is an issue. If that's the case, like I said, and even the U.S. action against St. Lucia, let's face it. Why is it the U.S. is funding our military or our police force? To help prevent drugs from reaching the territories. But St. Lucia is the hub. So if you pull out your whatever resources you have to give, these drugs will eventually reach your shores. It's not Grenada, it's not St. Vincent, it's St. Lucia, that's the hub. From Venezuela to St. Lucia cocaine, up to the U.S. through the Virgin Islands and so on. So we both have to lose. But again, the U.S. is the mighty U.S. But the theory about if you have links with Petrocarib, you have links with Iran, and then the U.S. will look at X, Y, and Z. I do not buy it, because right now we are hearing that even in RSS programs, if the U.S. is funding, St. Lucia can take part. But RSS is made up of Grenada, who has Petrocarib, Dominica, St. Vincent, and some others. So I don't buy that theory. That's all.
Okay, thank you so much.
I think that the caller needs to be reminded that what I have been saying is that it may not be any one issue, but the compound effect of a various number of issues. And that is why I refer to making the judicial system more efficient, getting to the bottom of what might have transpired under Operation Restore Confidence, to ensure that in the exercise of establishing your relations, that we do not threaten existing ones. You don't want to bite the hand that feeds you. It's simple. These are very simple edicts. And whether, I think the bigger question is, with all the conversations that have been going on regarding whether there's a new foreign policy stance with respect to the United States, the people of St. Lucia need to know that. And if it is that St. Lucia is indeed very keen about establishing relations with new and emerging powers, all members of the Latin American left, that the people need to know this. I think there's a responsibility that politicians have, that the current administration has, to spell out and to advise the people of the policy direction of the country. We should never think of our policy, foreign policy position as a conundrum or something nebulous that you can't seem to quite get your head around it. It has to be clearly articulated, because these are largely philosophical and political positions, and the people, in the spirit of democracy, need to understand and agree to that direction.
Final comments from you, ma'am?
Well, I must say, in keeping with the new thrust and energy that the United Workers' Party is experiencing, on Sunday that we're going down to the south in Vieux-Fort, and we're inviting all our supporters and friends to join us in Vieux-Fort. We've got 2 motorcades leaving from Cul-de-Sac. I'm going along the west coast and branching into the east coast, leaving at 1 o'clock. So please do come and hear what we have to say about VAT on medication, about a shrinking economy, about the hardships that mothers and children feel. How easy is it for you to fund your children's return to school? How expensive is it? The whole host of issues that we want to talk about. Certainly the new foreign policy conundrum that we find ourselves in, and many of the other issues the callers have called, reiterating this evening. I want to say to St. Lucia, come, let's hear what the United Workers' Party newly elected executive has to say on these issues. Please join us in Vieux-Fort on Sunday. I look forward to welcoming you. And leave home early so you can be part of the fun and the excitement, and you get to understand the issues that affect the people of St. Lucia. Don't miss it.
Okay, Dr. Gale Rigobert, thank you so much for being my guest on this evening's Hot Button Issue. Thank you, as always, for contributing via calls and watching. If it's Wednesday, we discuss a hot button issue right here on Choice Television. Time now for the clip that peaked.
Can you choose where you're going to die? Answer me. Except if you're not committing suicide.
But if somebody dies as a result of this excavator obstructing the road, then you will be implicated in that.
How I will be? No. Accident are caused, it does not happen.
That there is this obstruction.
I am more inconvenienced than them. I am more inconvenienced.
Is your life in danger?
Of course. Because this is my deliberate.
that's the broadcast once again. Thank you so much for watching. Tune in tomorrow, same time. Well, tune in tomorrow from 8 o'clock in the evening for the broadcast Choice News Now, which also airs on Radio Caribbean International and Radio Free Anola in Soufrière. I'm Timothy Polio. Good night.